Welcome to G Fun Facts Online. Today, we're going to talk about a decade that literally put the world on a new track, the 1820s. But to understand how revolutionary this period was, we first have to picture a world locked in place, a world that moved at the speed of muscle and wind. In the early 1800s, life was intensely local. Most people were born, lived, and died within a few miles of the same spot. The idea of a quick trip was a fantasy. Society was tethered by the limits of its transport. On land, roads were often little more than dirt tracks that became impassable mud pits in the rain. Even on the best roads in America, a journey from Boston to New York could take 4 to 6 days. In Britain, despite some improved toll roads, the economics were punishing. A team of 4 horses could barely haul a 1.5-ton wagon 18 miles in a day. For heavy goods like coal, the fuel of the new industrial revolution, this was a crippling limitation. Industries were chained to their source of materials. Water was better. A single horse pulling a barge on a canal could move almost 50 times more weight than it could with a cart on a road. This simple principle sparked a period of, quote, canal mania, with thousands of miles of canals carved into the British landscape. The famous Bridgewater Canal, finished in 1761, was a perfect example, built to bring coal directly into the heart of Manchester. But canals had their own issues. They were expensive to build, followed geographically constrained routes, and could be knocked out of service by a drought or a hard frost. Journeys were slow, and navigating tunnels often required men to lie on their backs and literally walk along the tunnel ceiling with their feet, a dangerous practice known as legging. The Industrial Revolution was creating an insatiable appetite for raw materials and a desperate need to ship finished goods to new markets. The existing system of roads and canals was creaking under the strain, becoming a critical bottleneck. The world was crying out for a technology that could conquer distance, time, and terrain. And the answer would come from a revolutionary combination of steam and iron. The idea of the railway didn't just appear in the 1820s. Its origins lie in the humble wagonways of British coalfields centuries earlier. As early as the 1500s, horse-drawn carts were running on wooden rails to more easily move heavy loads of coal from the mines. These wooden tracks provided a smoother, lower-friction surface than a dirt road. Over time, these rails were improved, first by capping them with iron plates, and later by pioneers like William Jessup, who introduced all-iron rails. But the motive power remained the same, the reliable, yet limited strength of a horse. Parallel to this, the steam age was dawning. James Watt's improved stationary steam engine became the workhorse of the Industrial Revolution in the late 1700s, pumping water from mines and powering factory machines. But Watt's engines were huge, heavy, and operated at low pressures. He was deeply skeptical of using high-pressure steam for locomotion, considering it dangerously explosive. It took a bold Cornish inventor, Richard Trevithick, to challenge this. Trevithick understood that an engine had to be compact, light, and powerful to be mobile, and that meant using high-pressure steam. In 1804, at the Penydarren Iron Works in Wales, Trevithick achieved something incredible. His unnamed locomotive hauled 10 tons of iron and 70 men over 9 miles of track. This was the first ever recorded journey of a steam locomotive on rails. He even demonstrated another engine, the Catch Me Who Can, on a circular track in London, charging the public for rides. So why didn't the railway age begin right then and there? Because the technology of the track wasn't ready. The cast iron rails of the time were too brittle. They frequently cracked under the concentrated weight of Trevithick's heavy engines. His vision was ahead of the materials available. The next decade saw crucial, if incremental, progress. In 1812, the locomotive Salamanca used a toothed wheel on a racked rail because engineers still doubted that smooth wheels could get enough grip. A year later, William Hedley's Puffing Billy finally proved that the simple adhesion of a smooth wheel on a smooth rail was sufficient. The pieces were all there, but they needed one man to put them all together. That man was George Stephenson, and the 1820s would be his decade. Born into a poor mining family, Stephenson received no formal education, but taught himself to read and write, and became a master engine doctor in the collieries. This hands-on experience gave him an intimate understanding of steam power. In 1814, he built his first locomotive, the Blücher. Over the next few years, he built more than a dozen engines, constantly refining the designs. His key improvement was perfecting the steam blast pipe, which directed exhaust steam up the chimney to increase the draft for the fire. This made the fire hotter, generating more steam and more power. Stephenson wasn't a radical inventor like Trevithick, but he was a master synthesizer and a relentless perfecter. The true dawn of the railway age can be dated to a specific project. A group of businessmen, led by Edward Pease, wanted a more efficient way to transport coal to the port of Stockton-on-Tees. Their initial plan was for a horse-drawn tramway, but in 1821, George Stephenson met with Pease and argued for a steam railway, famously telling him that a locomotive was worth 50 horses. Pease was convinced. On September 27, 1825, the Stockton and Darlington Railway opened. Stephenson himself was at the controls of his new engine, Locomotion No. 1. The train consisted of wagons of coal, a wagon of flour, and a specially built passenger carriage named the Experiment. Hundreds of eager passengers also piled into empty coal wagons fitted with temporary seats. The train reached a then astonishing speed of 15 miles per hour. It was the world's first public railway to use steam locomotives, and though its main purpose was hauling goods, it also established the principle of carrying fare-paying passengers. It was a massive success. If Stockton and Darlington was the proof of concept, the next great project, the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, was meant to be the perfected model. It was a far more ambitious, double-tracked line designed for fast passenger and goods traffic, but the directors weren't sure what should power it. Some favored stationary engines pulling carriages with cables. Stephenson championed the locomotive. To settle the debate, they announced a grand competition in 1829. The Rainhill Trials. A prize of £500 was offered for the locomotive that could meet a strict set of performance and reliability requirements. The contest came down to three main engines: the Sans Pareil, the innovative but fragile Novelty, and the Rocket, entered by George Stephenson and his son, Robert. The Rocket was the undisputed star. While the other engines broke down, the Rocket completed all the tests flawlessly, hitting a top speed of 30 miles per hour. Its victory was a triumph of superior design. The Rocket combined three crucial innovations that would become the standard for steam locomotives for the next 130 years. First, a multi-tubular boiler. Instead of one large flue, the Rocket had 25 copper tubes that carried hot gases from the firebox through the surrounding water. This massively increased the heating surface area, generating steam much more quickly. Second, a separate, water-jacketed firebox, which allowed for a more intense fire. And third, direct drive pistons connected at a near horizontal angle to the driving wheels, providing a much more efficient transfer of power. The victory of the Rocket at Rainhill silenced the critics and provided the definitive technological template for the railway revolution. But the locomotive, no matter how advanced, was only half the story. The revolution rested on two pillars: advanced steam and stronger iron. All the power of the Rocket would have been useless without a track that could handle it. As Trevithick discovered, early cast-iron rails were too brittle and shattered under the weight of an engine. They also came in short lengths, making for a rough, jarring ride. The breakthrough came in 1820, when an engineer named John Birkinshaw patented a new method for rolling wrought iron rails. Unlike brittle cast iron, wrought iron is tougher and more malleable. It could withstand the shock and weight of a passing locomotive. Birkinshaw's process also allowed rails to be made in longer, 15-foot lengths. This meant fewer joints, creating a much smoother and more stable track. Stephenson used these rails for the Stockton and Darlington line, and they were essential for the high-speed Liverpool and Manchester Railway. It's a common misconception to think the railways started with steel. That came later. The revolution of the 1820s was built on the crucial partnership of the advanced Stephenson locomotive and the durable Birkinshaw wrought iron rail. The impact of this new system was immediate and explosive. Economically, the cost of transporting goods, especially heavy commodities like coal, plummeted. This unleashed industry. Factories could be built almost anywhere, confident that materials and products could be moved efficiently. The construction of the railways themselves created a massive new industry, demanding huge amounts of iron, coal, and labor. Financing these projects transformed financial markets, attracting vast sums of money during a period that became known as railway mania. Markets went from being local to national. For the first time, fresh produce from the countryside could be sped to the cities. Fresh fish from the coast became a staple in inland towns, leading to the rise of fish and chips. The railway literally diversified the nation's diet. Socially, the change was just as profound. A journey that once took days by stagecoach now took hours. This gave birth to the concept of commuting and the growth of the first suburbs. Leisure travel, once a privilege of the elite, became possible for the masses, opening up seaside resorts and creating a new culture of day trips. The world simply felt smaller. This new interconnectedness even forced the standardization of time. Before trains, every town had its own local time based on the sun. This was unworkable for a system dependent on precise timetables. The railway companies imposed a standardized railway time based on London, which quickly became the national standard. The railway synchronized the country. Physically, the railway carved a new geometry into the landscape. Engineers blasted massive cuttings through hills, raised colossal embankments across valleys, and built monumental viaducts and bridges. Entire towns like Crewe and Swindon sprang up from nothing, their existence owed entirely to the railway. In just one decade, the world had been remade. The 1820s weren't the beginning of the idea of rail, but the crucible where all the elements, the powerful engine, the strong track, and the visionary engineers, were forged into a system that would define the modern world. The opening of the Stockton and Darlington Railway in 1825 was the announcement. The triumph of the rocket at the Rainhill Trials in 1829 was the definitive technological statement. The successful fusion of steam and iron in that decade laid down the tracks, both literally and figuratively, for the next century of progress. The hiss of steam and the rhythmic clang of wheels on steel that first echoed through northern England became the soundtrack to a new age.